Hi, welcome to this live webinar where today we're going to talk about the due date for Cyprus tax in all its complexity. So it's never quite as simple as it seems. So for many years, expats living and working abroad with low incomes could pay not even have to do a tax return in Cyprus, even though they might still need to do a tax return in the UK or elsewhere. So things have changed quite a lot for people and this year, but also there's a level of complexity between this year and last year. So this year you have to do a self-assessment of the tax that is due to be paid, and then next year you do the returns of that tax, and the return of that tax settles any balance. And this is where the complexity and confusion can set in. So when we're talking about the tax returns that are due now, this year for Cyprus, we're talking in two contexts. We're talking about the returns that are due for last year's income, and we're talking about the self-assessed tax payments that are due on a self-assessed basis for the current year. So this year you pay the tax, and next year you do the assessment. So in 2022, in Cyprus, you're paying you're submitting the return for the 2021 tax. Now, the big change that's happened at the last minute, just as the ability to do the tax return was released, is that all individuals who are resident in Cyprus with any income at all, so if you've got any positive income from salary, jobs, interest, dividends, royalties, property rental income, or profits from share dealings, any income at all of any positive amount, everyone is now required to do a tax return in Cyprus. Previously, only if you had income over a certain level. So for individuals, that's not the case now. So everyone needs to do a tax return, which means you need a tax number, you need to be registered to be able to submit that online. And if you need to get exemptions for non-dom status, then that needs to be submitted and sorted as well. All these things take time, and the due date for the individual tax return for Cyprus is the 31st of July this year. So you need to be registered and online to be able to submit that return by the 31st of July this year for last year. Now, you can still vary that up to the 31st of December this year, but you need to do your first return to avoid penalty by 31st of July. And then on the 1st of August, any balancing tax payment from last year is paid. So if you didn't pay your tax in 2021, then, or there's an extra amount to pay, then that balance is due on the 1st of August. But you can't make that payment, sorry, due by the 1st of August, but you can't make that payment until you've done the return. You can't create the tax debt until you've done the tax return, and therefore you can't make a payment in Cyprus. So if you've got problems and delays in making your tax return, you will still be in penalty land, but you can't pay the tax until you've done the return. But that's not all. At the 31st of July is also the due date for the temporary assessment tax for the current year. So any tax that you're due on your this year's income is due by the end of July as well, payable by the 1st of August. Now, another factor on this to consider is that when you've got a deadline to pay in Cyprus, there's normally a period of grace. So when it says that the tax is due by the 1st of August, it's not overdue until the end of August. So you can do the tax return and still make the payment sometime in August without it being overdue. So it's due by the 1st of August. It's late if it's paid on the 2nd, but it's not overdue and subject to penalties until after the 31st of August. So you've got that bit of grace there, but not for the tax return. The tax return's not made by the 31st of July, it's late. and we have an issue there. It's a temporary tax. The self-assessed tax for the current year for Cyprus individual, payable in July, it is payable in 2 instalments. One in July, and the second is due in December. So at the end of December, the second that tax is then due. So by the 31st of July, you've submitted your full return for the previous year, and you've also made your self-assessment for the current year and paid any tax, 50% in July, 50% in December, with any balancing adjustments to your previous year's tax return made by the 31st of December. Everything's finished and fine and dandy, except there are special defence taxes and health taxes, which are flat rate taxes, which are separate to income tax in Cyprus. Now, when you consider those, they're due at the 30th of June and the 31st of December as well. So if you've got any dividend, interest, or property rental income subject to any sort of income that's subject to a special defence tax, that tax liability is payable at the end of June and then at the end of December. That also applies for the health taxes as well. A non-dom can get an exemption for the defence taxes, but not for the health taxes. The only exemption for the health tax is if you're a state pensioner in Cyprus or the EU, including the UK. So think about that, because you've got that additional tax liability to pay. And that is the reason why Cyprus now require everybody to do a tax return. So even if you've only got 10,000 property rental income or pension income from abroad that's not normally taxed in Cyprus, you will now have potentially the health tax and maybe some other taxes as well. So anybody needs to get their tax registration up to date by the end of this year, and certainly before July, have things in motion to avoid penalties and interest on that. The self-employed, if you're running a business in Cyprus that is not a company, you're in a slightly different position. So if your turnover is below 70,000, you don't need audited accounts, in which case your due dates for tax are exactly the same as that for an individual. If your turnover is over 70,000 a year, then you have an audit requirement, the same as a company. So now, company, or you're self-employed with 1,000, these are the due dates that you need to follow for that. And they're remarkably similar, except that at the end of May, so there's a week left now to do that employer's return, confirming the payroll for the previous year. If a company is doing a payroll, they've got a monthly submission of social and tax to declare and pay, which is payable within a month. So the tax, the pay-as-you-earn tax, pay-as-you-earn social insurance and health taxes deducted for at the end of 1 month are payable within a month into the Cyprus system. The returns for that for the previous year is due by the end of May. The companies also have a self-assessment liability, the same as an individual. So by the 31st of July and the 31st of December, there needs to be a self-assessment of the potential corporation tax, or if it's sole trader, the tax of the self-employed business by the half year and the end of the year, July and December, and then again pay that 50% tax. Okay. Now, again, the special defence taxes apply, and the health taxes apply, and again they need to be paid by the 30th of June or the 31st of December in 2 halves. And again, a balancing payment for any of these taxes is paid when you submit the final return. So with a company or a self-employed individual on audit, the tax return deadlines are slightly different. So the audit starts as soon as the tax year ends, and effectively everybody's tax year, individual or company, ends at the end of December each year, and the audit starts straight away. And then by the middle of the year, we need to have any balance of tax from the previous year paid. So again, the company's done a self-assessment in July and December, and then by the following July, August, any balance of tax that's due is due to be paid. However, the tax return doesn't need to be submitted. If a company, or if an audited business, company or sole trader, is doing a return, an audited tax return on paper, it needs to be submitted by the 31st of December, by the end of the year. If they're submitting it online, they've got another 3 months to do it. So the return for last year, 2021, for an audited business is due by March 23. Okay. Months is the period for an online audited submission that can be done. So it sounds very good, and it can be. VAT is sort of like common throughout the EU in that there's a 3 monthly return and it's due by the 10th of the following month. So technically payments are due on a monthly basis or the end of a quarterly basis for social insurance or VAT or payroll. They're due by the end of the month, but they're not overdue until 10 days after that. But penalties can then still apply, and this is something to bear in mind. The penalties for a late return can be up to 200. In addition to that, you can get penalties on interest that's underdeclared, which might be 5%, and then if it's still not paid and it's more than 2 or 3 months overdue, it would be another 5%, so it's 10% penalty on the tax charge. And if it's still outstanding, interest is then added at a rate of about 1.75%. It varies each year. So you've got those penalties that are due. So that's clear as mud in words. And we're going to make a handout for you to get, and you'll be able to get a copy of that by going along to our website at projectpartnership.com and download a copy of that tax calendar for Cyprus. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel, so subscribe and keep up to date with other things and changes and variations. We've seen over the last few years with COVID that extensions have been applied. We can't assume that that's going to apply now. Governments need their tax in, and so they'll push you to get the return and pay the penalty if you don't. There's lots of new people that need to get registered for tax, and at Project Partnership we can help you. So contact us at projectpartnership.com. We've got a retained client service which will cover tax registrations for you if you're a tax resident in Cyprus, and to enable you to get those returns. As long as we can get some sort of return done by the end of July and a reasonable amount of tax paid, then you can avoid penalties. But sitting on your hands and doing nothing will open it up. And as expats don't have a choice, you have to be tax resident somewhere. So if you're not tax resident in Cyprus, you're tax resident in your home country or your country of work. So to enjoy the tax benefits in Cyprus, where expats pay 0% on dividends tax, and 5% on pensions, and low rates of corporation tax at 12.5%. Let's do the work to make sure that you minimise your liability. For more information and guidance, contact us at projectpartnership.com, or subscribe as a retained client and to follow our stuff. We've got a couple of things following on from this live webinar. retained client Facebook group, and answer sessions on Twitter Spaces. Thanks for